Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We have two outstanding poets with us today, Holly Geller and David Garyan. Holly will read first and then David. Holly Geller has been teaching writing and Romance languages at Art Center College of Design since 2015. In addition to her first collection of poems, her MFA thesis at Otis College of Art and Design, The Porthole 2011, was a translation of Adriano Spatola's soul novel 1964, which was published by the now defunct Otis Seems Isity Editions, forgive my pronunciation. Her poems have been published by University of Chicago Press 2017 and Atelier Editions 2020. Ms. Geller is also a jazz vocalist and voiceover actor / narrator. Her poetry is lyrical, edgy, experimental, full of erudition. Here's a superb poet, Holly Geller.
Thank you so much, Harry and Holly and Allegra and David, for having me. I'm going to give a brief intro. Typically, I don't give an introduction, but I feel like this deserves an introduction. And I'll just go ahead and read it from the afterword of my collection, which is called Off the Menu, which I'll just briefly show you the design of this book. It's very rare that one can choose who the designer is that they get paired with, but I had the pleasure of working with my sister, who's a book designer, and so there you go, Off the Menu. I'll just give a little intro as to what this book was about. Afterward. After over 40 days and nights, beginning with LA's lockdown from March 19th to May 4th, 2020, each of these poems, a book of nights, took shape. Each one required a prompt or a swift kick in the rear until enough impetus was fodder for a canter, a gallop over the next racetrack, the next diurnal sling toward penning a new poem after sundown. And by the midway point, noting that nothing made sense anymore, not in the news, in what we had as normal, capital N, in old friends resurfacing and long-term ones melting away, these two entered into the fray, and beginning soliloquies gave way to syncopation. How could it not? Animal behavior, gaits, jazz, and poetry. But we'll always have music, and hopefully these new order fables will be read out loud by some to music that is yet to be composed. And so each of these poems I wrote one poem a night for 40 nights because that's the definition of quarantina. And I took a photograph in Chicago. You guys can see it. This woman's curtains. And when I finish reading, I actually have a giveaway. So maybe somebody could get in touch with Allegra or can directly message me. Here's my email. My Instagram is at Polyopolis. And I have a giveaway, 2 little gifts, because I believe in chance and hopefully hearing from people. I want this to feel like a participatory event. If we were in person, I would be there and doing the same. All right. So Off the Menu, 1 poem a night. And so I pretty much kept them chronological. And I will start with a little quote from Charlie Chaplin. And this is from his autobiography, my autobiography. I boarded the Queen Elizabeth at 5 a.m, a romantic hour, but for the sordid reason of having to avoid a process server. My lawyer's instructions were to steal aboard, lock myself in my suite, and not to appear on deck until the pilot disembarked. Being groomed for the last 10 years to expect the worst, I obeyed. I had been looking forward to standing on the top deck with my family, enjoying the stirring moment of a ship's severance as it glides off and away into another life. Instead, I was ignominiously locked in my cabin, peering through the porthole. Charlie Chaplin, my autobiography. So that's the beginning of the book. And so it begins with the first poem. And I'll just read a few, and I'll stop before David's reading. Prismism. The buzzard and the monkey changed their tune, and Lady Daylight halted. New advertising records set. You're too expensive. The sale is over. If you took it to the bridge, the clock, embarrassed and ever so, witnessed the second hand, curved, now straight. Color is a battle. Napoleon as living proof that arsenic wasn't the right shade of green for his tailored shirts. The endings borrowed. Money turned to love and said, it's humiliating. One city, no angels. As for the three-legged lion, movie studios asked for roars, and no one smiled again. There's the geometric dance for a wristwatch, its carrier asserting once a web of well-stocked habits transmitting the revolution of perpetuity, unspringing from a remembered premonitory ode, slouching toward borrowed time. The snail and the roadrunner. Said the snail to the roadrunner, I may be slow, but I can't go steady. That, my friend, is a nymph. The roadrunner listened, but had to go. There's a curfew in Yucca Valley. How like aircraft carrier to be ready at the tarmac. How unlike it, the F-115, its motor discontent without the omnipresent dream of a Poseidon adventure. Both more loud than thoughts, both as cheap as fear. Who then dons the badge of courage, mes amis, c'est la guerre? Who, pray, might ask the piano player to play it again, Sam? Here's to all that, to bankrolling a gilded dream, from moving in with said snail, to pausing a sunset. Quantum to quirk. What falls between a quiet madness, the melancholy of being chosen by yet another host, is remedied by the sciences revisited. Mythology wills, art history, reliefed, inspiration for crafting new apparel, prepping for an anticipated carnival from Venice, foolproof and impermeable. To summon the sartorial beak doctor for a relay race beyond all races, the first to reach the submerged masked ball, fully sealed, wins the Tupperware set and a round-trip funicular ride to your exile of choice, a soft climb to Anacapri, the penumbra sought in Tomis, now Costanta, to parallel Ovid's or Ovid. Consolation prize. Getting out of our own way as battleship to hummingbird. The psychiatrist dialed the preacher. Oh, the lazy, deadly words, that refrain, time heals all wounds, all Spartacus, all sorrow and hope. So much so that even the slave still finds love for humankind. And so we're almost at the halfway point of the book, in which it takes a big turn, even in the table of contents. The turn goes from here to, whoop, there's a switch. So we're at the almost at the halfway point. And here's the middle of the book. Primer coats. 1. The bridge never opened between comedy and rites of passage, because with the locusts' arrival, we forgot laughter's serene pastures taken over by a new rep, Agent Orange. The man in the suit isn't funny, wears a wrinkled fedora and asks for everyone's papers at the wrong checkpoint. The memory perhaps buried long before Buchenwald, not Buchwald, nor art. You know the coat, primed for the tempera, ready for battle, gesso palette and instructed strokes. Or get inspiration. This is now or never. Forget mantras. Whatever order was, it's all been rewritten, uncoded, for flight attendant into its no-fly zone. You and all the other pros, the pronouns, the profligate, they'll learn. The nunc, the noun, or never. 2. Those saudades can talk about the weather. Paper or prayers? I'd choose plastic if we were you, but all pronouns have sold for a song, and I can't keep time. No downbeat, only a pregnant Gregorian chant, all echo, and again, no humor. 3. What's your particle, arvopert, the litany, cold, quiet, and perfect, Estonian landing. As to a bell tower we rise, all. 4. Urgency is a cul-de-sac, unnamed as of yet, but was once a map, a tarmac, printed on Tyvek. You know the drill. Reinventing language, the telefax roars. A newer ribbon has been inked, and we climb the invisible, the rote, the rope, the ladder, the oratorio. 5. You know the joke. On the 24th hour, we learned how to swim, and the cigarette girls have all been rickshawed home to Ma. Nature is cruel, he wrote. Ba-dum-bum. Rimshot. Is this thing ever off? The follow spot operator missed the cue, zoomed in on a petit four, a cotillion, the intricacies of a brassiere laced up in promised land. 6. But we digress. Surely there's a curtain to curtail, a near Moussain. Surely Ray Bradbury will find the next circus coming to town, and our time machine will be Ziegfeld follied. Give us the punchline, the proscenium, and come all ye to cab Callaway the night anachronistic. 7. Enter Judy Holliday. Comedy as a mere season, so much so that when you first culled the holiday near beginning a yen for her talent in spades, that her dimpled, graceful wit remains comedy seasoned, an amped royal flush. If you play your cards right, as there is time for dealing, for the strategy as of late, comedy this season lacks orchestration, but then quixotic at best, the next hand so dealt to dress up vaudeville in vibrato and unclaimed pitch, her comedy, a season. 8. I know what I forgot. Before such distractions, before adding to Descartes, aiming for the I ams, such is the lull of silence. 9. 9 is plenty and doesn't take lightly to nonchalance. I described her in song last night, what with her roll of the shoulder, as suggestive as one might pout, a turning point, a medusa, in paraffin, and metal platforms none other. Underscoring poppy fields, outsourcing color. 10. And back again. As companion chasing its tail, to hopscotch, to near verisimilitude. Rimshot, Bond. From the self-conscious cheetah. Too thin, the she-sprinter. Altruistic, this ubiquitous single mother par excellence, exquisite, always the humanitarian, sans retractable claws, wouldn't need a reflection to fawn over as she's never been taught the mirrored edge. The finish line always delineating others' needs. The advertising heads must surely be wrong. Think Dorothea, James, and Walker. Think Dust Bowl. Let us now praise them all. Surely she has her very own Hollywood ending. Girl meets beep, becomes beep, and drives off into the sunset. The Pacific by her side, always. And from the AM radio, I'll find you in the morning sun, and when the night is new, I'll be looking at the moon, and I'll be seeing you. The understory. The brillig murmur of childhood. An ageless incantation, so much so we take the elevator subterranean, relying on ossicles, stapes, a French staircase, cochlear. I know what you're thinking. Jean Moreau, soundtrack by Miles Davis, cinematographic distraction. The present as distortion. Ask the fungi, summon John Cage. A requisite hibernation or apoplexy. You could call it prayers, your mat of moss. The incommunicado, illuminating mass undertones. The screen fades, the actor gets paid. And I'm going to quickly just shift out of the book for one quick second because I had the honor of being published by Atelier Édition Press, which is out of both Los Angeles and Canada, Montreal. And they printed these really lovely special edition postcards. So I'll read from the John Cage special edition. They had asked different artists to summon Cage. So from that poem, I'll go to these who were published by Atelier Édition. 1. Boletus et Amanita. John Cage being a mycologist, collector of mushrooms. Boletus et Amanita. Amanita being the most poisonous of mushrooms. My sister, who taught me most everything I could learn about jazz, was making us risotto with funghi porcini. I was the sous chef. The dried mushrooms were taking their bath, reviving from their long and sealed flight from Tuscany. I didn't know the bathwater was integral to the dish, had thrown it out, along with any skills at scatting. Guilt, having no sense of silence. 2. Lecture on sleep. Quote, the base ideal my cities. Surely you remember rest, deep-rooted, the solace, the well-covered safety of canopies. Walk an unfamiliar path, and when you have reached its narrowing, like an earthworm's descent into the damp and cool earth and roots, that stillness can't be sped up. Basidio my cities, as all of you are tired, end quote. And another one, also from their collection, John Cage's Poems for and Art for, this John Cage edition. In New Hampshire, I watched Merce Cunningham perform, staring at the octogenarian's feet, recoiled king oysters, obfuscating silence, this dance of ages, the sage of eras, because both Martha Graham and his lament melded, opened curtains. Quote, I don't need sound to talk to me, end quote. Out of time, pleurotis eringi, ces gestes, une sculpture musicale. And so I wrote this poem, and I kept movement in mind and silence and Martha Graham's choreography. And Merce Cunningham was married to John Cage and danced with Martha Graham. Okay, I'm checking the time. 10 more minutes, if that. The recalcitrant eel. Hovering above the parrot eels, a snorkeler's near religious observation, how below they fought, or perhaps mere play. The observer isn't one for asking as the ocean floor speeds up, and as quickly as they appeared, so entered the moray eel, fully toothed and fancy-free. Asked the recalcitrant eel to the tourist, for what it's worth, what is it worth it? Coral and surf, bleached and retreating. The lone tourist observed, now shrinking. The scratch of knee may need some tending. Paradise parades and at a cost. The island breeze, though heady, berates those lost in search of meaning, religion, unmoored dross. The birthright of talent. Obedient to expression, too shy to navy, no impetus as urgent as seafaring capacities, mark the map of Ella, 17 at the Apollo, the audience taking root. Or Sassy, most lucky, stealing her way out of her bedroom window to hear live music, playing the piano at 7. Tom Jobim flights might never have had an airdrome had he not given up drafting. Say it may take your nova of a bossa a decade or two. Say it took a lifetime to fall into its net. Usher through Escher, to fail perhaps and land where it hurts best. Give in. The call is worthy armor. If you scale its siren song as daily omen of trust, oh, but to turn one's back on it. recoils lotus into mud, a blast radius of misery. 8 minutes and 22 seconds. Sunlight reaches the earth, dancing to Curtis Mayfield's Move On Up. The mathematician opens its eyes. A companion masters the breakfast cup. From earth and steamed heat, the lovebirds' shared potation could well reverberate, flutter back to islands, pebble, snowbank, a library orrery. Cosmos is chaos and only chaos. Morse coded and dusted off. Rolodex for Nicola Botacin. Forgive me. I have flipped through each card and yours was missing. Even the tabs are unhinged. I have written nearly everyone a letter, one per night, after chiseling away at each poesy, but you were the absentee. In other words, no letter for Boccaccio or Jodorowsky, hence this entry. Rolling on, illuminerà mi camino como una mariposa que arde. Not for George, nor Burns, nor Gershwin. I had filed Durante under Jimmy, but that too is faded, and I can't decipher my penmanship as I had not yet been born. I would grace you a note, take the fountain pen for a drive, fill her up in Korean pigments aptly named Walking the Dog or Pater Noster Quies in Caelis, from jejune grays to plums. Think spring. It's love at last, and even the polite policeman has let street cleaning tickets slide. Today, nicely, conveyed his dream in song as we sit down to the headliner of Pegasus, renewing his love for Medusa. Catatonic orators over screens predict such serials as Pastor and Pizza, and as sinners we remain as loquacious as turtles. No slower ballad has there been for the pauper, for those garish in-betweeners. For the news is but a wobble, and this spring restrung in a fever of stingrays. I'm going to stop with this reading from this book, and I will end my half hour with just a few more poems. Smother the moon. Smother the moon, if with will to the cosmos that in spring early bloom, if you caught the Pleiades and left the boat to rock mid Styx to Hades, smother the moon, leave desire's boon, perched atop Mulholland before a sky band yodeling, ain't life grand? There are kisses for futures meant, and broken hearts in heaven's tent. Smother the moon, my brother in Istanbul, my herd above the Aegean. Bucolic breath regard Tin Pan Alley to a grand finale, then a swan song. Build neath columns for octopi and porpoise. For octopi and porpoise to cavort away their doldrums. Smother the moon. It's time. And I will read two more. This is an acrostic poem named after the movie La Notte. And so each line begins with La Notte. La Notte argues with no one other than those encapsulated by lies, accepted as noise, oceanic teetering toward entropy. Listen, love, agree but nearer to one note, tickled tonight ebony as makeshift timber. Laughingly arrogant, nodding over true and true every time, till Los Angeles, naps, outs, tricks, then tempts, entertainments. Religion by the yard. He throws new seeds of grass on finely manicured manure, Seeds spray in a repetitive rainbow, arm back and down, a priest in ceremony complete with incense swinging. Myrrh, frankincense, stifled sneezes from on-site drivers, and I, a humble onlooker. Et nomine pater, et filii, et Beverly, et Dohini, et misericordum. Amen. And last two poems. Earth Dreamers. We once lived near trees, netted, recoiling, and corresponding to the surround. I have explored an image of a house connected to mother. What was mine is now years. And finally, my last poem is in honor of Shakespeare's magnum opus, his final work, The Tempest. Miranda wrote of Prospero's turn south, that he married Sycorax, sold Caliban to the circus, and never released Ariel. Concern is a small word, and magic, long lost to greed. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for a wonderful reading, Polly. Your poetry is fun, surprising, playful, imaginative. I love the playfulness of your language in your 49th procession. Your lovely and serious poetry sings. And we just have time for maybe one question. But when did you write your first poem?
As a human being, when did I first start writing poetry? Or no? Or when? Do you mean for the book?
When you were an angel.
No. Do you mean for this book?
Any poem you ever wrote in your life? When did you write your first poem?
I think I always was writing something. If it wasn't a ghost story, it was a poem. So I must have been pretty young, and I sadly only saved the ghost story. I don't have any of the poetry, but I'm sure it was something very very dramatic, and I'm sure there was a lot of crying and probably some cats.
Well, just a quick question is, who are some of your influence before you started writing in a serious, regular way?
Some of my major influences, I would say, remain. That's a tough one. I am a huge Shakespeare fan, so anything by the Bard. I love the poetry of Gabriel Garcia, of Lorca. Garcia Lorca. Gabriel Garcia Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude. And for some of the gals that I read, I love Patricia Highsmith, Joan Didion for her essays and memoirs. And my gosh, I can't. My mind is drawing a blank, but there are definitely so many. And Neil Gaiman, I adore, because and Kurt Vonnegut as well.
You have great taste, and we're going to do a reading from Lorca's complete poems next month on the 20th. I'll send you a calendar, but our time is up. Our time is up, so thank you very much, Polly. What a great reading that was. You're marvelous. Thank you. Our next poet, David Garyan. David, why don't you come on the show? David Garyan holds an MA in English and the MFA in creative writing from Long Beach State, from Cal State Long Beach. In addition, he received an MA in Cultural Heritage and Human Rights from the University of Bologna. He has published 3 chapbooks and 1 full collection of poetry with Main Street Rag. Some of the notable writers and academics he has interviewed are Sarah Nuzil, forgive my pronunciation, Elena Poniatowska, Robert Pinsky, and Clifford Ando, among others. His poem, Open Letter to the Students of Brandeis University with Bibliography, was praised by Joyce Carol Oates and promoted on her official Twitter page. He edits California Poets, a running anthology of the most exciting poetic voices from the state. He lives in Trento, Italy. I want to thank you, David, for your truly amazing, copious series on California poetry. Thank you for including me. It's on capital L, capital A, little DIGE on the net. Strength, clarity, and vision are inherent in his poetry. Here's a splendid poet, David Garyan.
Good afternoon, Harry. Good afternoon, Paulie. It's a real great pleasure to be on the program. I wanted to thank you, Harry, and everyone at the Creative Chaos channel for having me, and thank you also to Allegra, Jennifer Clymer, and Bob Beecher. I'd like to start my part of the afternoon by reading the work of another poet, and that poet is Bart Edelman. Bart was my first poetry teacher and continues to be a lasting influence. So this poem is called Revolution, and it's from Bart's sixth collection, Whistling to Trick the Wind. You think there must be a right for every wrong, a man for every woman, a nest for every sparrow. It never occurs to you to question if the earth still spins on its axis. The moon has lost its glow. The flood arrives too soon. You go about your business, leaving nothing to chance, because it does not exist in the world where you live. And the only name you know for uncertainty is fate. You follow your faith each day, filled with the good sense to understand how kindness presses the universe ahead, one revolution at a time. You who are without fear, do not abandon hope in those of us who remain unsure of our next step, unsteady on our feet, uneasy along the path. So, I'll transition now into my own work, and this first piece was written as a result of my long sojourn here in Italy, which has been 5 years now. And I'd like to thank Alexis Rome-Fancher for inviting me to submit to Cultural Daily, because this poem did, in many ways, come about as a result of that invitation back in 2022. And it's called From Venice Beach to Venice, Italy. Business is good or bad, depending who you ask, but business remains the same, much like plain spaghetti when it's cooked across the world. Come far crescere il vostro business? How do you grow your business? Non lo so, dice il veneziano. I don't know, says the guy from Venice. But which one? And though we both work different hours and days, the weekend remains il weekend in the end. Cosa farai nel weekend? I think you understand. Because we're all looking forward to escaping life's monotony, like Italian women buying groceries in high heels, or American girls in flip-flops getting gelato from Capri in Marina del Rey. The aim is the same. Our lives are graffiti, some admired, some erased, and some left alone in places where our walls are built for fresco, where they're erected to keep out immigrants and also immigranti, and where walls are left in silence or perhaps even forgotten to be what they are. This next poem is also from the same Cultural Daily feature, and it's called Perspectives. The world is an electrician receiving shock therapy to treat the mania of being electrocuted at work. No, it's an astronomer in a blackout, walking home with his head down, because the extra light from the stars won't help him navigate the confusion of life. And maybe that's also wrong, because in some graveyard, there is a coroner buried next to an undertaker, and both knew neither the cause nor the depth of their alienation, like shadows falling on snow that feel deprived of the warm light that can kill them. And still, this sounds false, because there are spies who've excelled at their jobs, only to be diagnosed with multiple personalities, and now they can no longer work, like clocks which stopped working at 5:30, but for years, you've only checked the time at 5:30. This following poem is from my collection, Disinformation, and it was published by Main Street Rag in 2019. It's called Dear Psychiatrist. My life is a supermarket full of choices, but what I want is not in stock. When I share secrets, it's only the most boring ones, especially during our session. Writing this on a blank page turns me on. This page is intentionally left blank. I resist peer pressure with my inability to make friends. All my ideas are pure 100% orange juice from concentrate. My stream of consciousness loves slippery slopes, and this attitude will only get worse. Cocaine is what I consider rush hour traffic. I buy shoes that are 3 sizes too large just to leave a bigger carbon footprint. When I go to a gentleman's club, I never meet anyone who doesn't embody its name. My dream is to build 1,000 landfills full of nothing but reusable water bottles. I envision a perfect world in which equal opportunity won't discriminate against opportunists. My interest is specialty in interest-free loans, where I never forget the favor and always expect something in return. My brain is the septic tank of a mental institution. This following poem is from that same collection, and it's called If You Could Be Anyone in the World, Who Would You Be? Not Charles Bukowski, his liver. This is my wish, really. I thought about other options, and actually for some time now, and nothing sounds quite as appealing. Albert Einstein, or his brain, would be nice, but that involves a lot of thinking, and I don't have the energy for it. A friend some time ago proposed the fists of Muhammad Ali. It was a good suggestion, I admit, but that entails dealing with constant soreness, not to mention hitting people all the time. No. When I declined the face of Marilyn Monroe, my girlfriend got angry, becoming insecure about her own features. Maybe it's because I'm a private person. People's constant attention would bother me, and also living than 36 is a must. Old Hank's liver will just have to do, and it's not a compromise, really. Think about this. I'd be happy all the time, and I wouldn't think. I'd never knock someone out, maybe only to sleep. Plus, I'd be responsible for making the rest of Buck's body happy, so he can write about what it is he writes about. Nobody likes a sober Charles Bukowski. And the next worst thing is a Charles Bukowski who can't process his liquor. See, I'd be very important. Like Marilyn, I could live in Hollywood, yet last so much longer, 73 years to be exact. That's more than twice as much. Now, we've done some longer pieces. Let's do a shorter piece. And this one I'd like to read is called The Author, Joan Didion, is Dead, December 12th, 2012. Joan Didion has died at the age of 87. Fans all around the world mourn the news, but French post-structuralists remain stoic through it all. The author is dead and always has been. This next poem comes from the Quarantine Diaries, and as basically everyone knows, Italy was the hardest hit by the pandemic right after China. I spent the entire pandemic in Italy and produced a daily diary totaling about 50 entries of poetry and prose. This is one of those pieces, and written between March 15th, 2020 to May 3rd of that same year. And it's a poem called Attitude. There have been too many mornings in which my body has yearned for sleep. Neither the sun could make me go out, nor the rain keep me at home. For years, I walked the streets with my eyes closed, trying to lose my sight without going blind. I smiled at people and held eye contact until they believed it was a pleasure to meet them. My thoughts were nothing but a ballerina's feet, which could no longer dance, but the mind told them otherwise. I ripped human beings out of myself and planted them in other people's gardens. Even the fruits they bore, I didn't collect. There were days where music itself couldn't move me. And as winter paralyzes lakes, I waited for the night that would ease my own body, not the thoughts below it. Like philosophers forced to be what their books won't allow, I wanted to act without consulting my mind. Be the best choreographer who gives people freedom to dance like they want. I'd now like to read a longer poem, and it's called Sicily. I would only read a few pages of it because it's basically a chapbook-length work. And I enjoyed writing this particular piece mostly because I had the chance to visit the island in 2020. But really because Sicily, as many authors have pointed out, is a place of extreme contradiction. It's friendliness yet distance, openness yet suspicion, and really generosity and betrayal. It's above all a culture of humility and great pride. Sicily, not every bad thing comes to harm you. Sicilian proverb. Gazing from the very toe of Italy, where the monument of Vittorio Emanuele III sticks out like an overgrown nail, Sicily at last reveals herself, a bride in a matriarchal society, and still she resists taking off her veil. The island is a window no one cares to look out of, but stealing a glance inside is like unlocking your lover's diary. No, it's like picking the lock of her flat without permission, knowing she won't mind. There are no secrets here, only mysteries, if you can simply imagine theaters without backstages. And neither are there plans or designs, only dreams and ideas if you can just picture conductors without rehearsal halls. Best of all, there are no questions, only curiosity and attraction if you can envision cooks who have recipes, but no teachers. This is the land of directors who let their actors be themselves. This is the sea of dancers who never follow their choreographers. And still I must ask, how many feet have trudged the black streets of Catania, paved with the angry voice of Etna? How many eyes in Ortigia have witnessed time purloin the rocks of Apollo's temple? How many hands no longer know the way marble was formed inside Palermo's Chiesa del Gesù? And what else are my questions besides parachutes, the ones which never open for those who must fall from the cliffs of time? If men could only have compasses, or any tool to make them see the ways of their futile pursuits, if women could just have babies they had no problem abandoning, if children could simply remember the world, to know it like old people who never left their places of birth, I would know the shores of your land have no meaning. I would know the echoes of your wheat fields are barren. I would know the songs your daughters and sons sing weren't passed down by their parents. But in time, the mountains have stood, and they've done this like performers who never got tired of bowing. The waters have walked like philosophers who could find clarity, and all this without seeking truth. The winds kept on speaking your name even when ships were forgetting your ports. Sicily, what more can be said? Like reading old books rescued from fires, the only answers are questions. Who planted this earth in the water? And how did people's roots grow so long for them not to forget how the ocean tastes? All that separates you from Italy is the distance on which a bridge can be built, but yet none exist. And maybe it's better this way. Let your body be yours and let it embrace all those who embark in your arms. But keep the steel hands of humanity away, for the metals and stones that fashion connections are precisely the matters which also build cages and walls. Let your land be a bazaar to which every culture can bring their spices and herbs. Let strangers be like friends cut off by oceans, the ones who rarely speak to each other, yet have so much in common. Let their flavors be mixed in the most radiant way. And still, it's hard to forget the hands which take more than they give. The way thirsty Bedouins won't renounce the deserts, plains of sand which hand them no water, so I imagine no other path but the sea leading to you. Forgive the waves inside me, which arrive like guests bearing no gifts, but recede like messengers who've brought you good news. Forgive the droughts in my ideas, which catch you like good friends who talk far too much, but always initiate the farewell. Forgive the gusts in my speech, which rush like thieves to your door, but walk away like parents who've given advice. Forgive the avalanches in my depression, which pull you down like drowning children, but release you like mountains, rocks of time whose slopes are so gentle. Tell me how I can be with you and still let you be free. To respect your past is to love you like a scholar. To admire your future is to worship you like a seducer. This next poem, I will return to the quarantine diaries, and it's from the same kind of daily 50 entry part that I did during that period. And this poem is called Instinct. In the beginning, before my birth, I was certain life would be no more than a womb without an umbilical cord, without a mother even. Surrounded by family and friends, I alienated myself like an abducted child who wasn't old enough to know what's happening. At the same time, I had friends who were closer than family and relatives living on maps I haven't looked at in 20 years. When I was born, I knew nothing except the secrets of my own biology. Even God couldn't tell me what to do. I had no desire to control hunger, no need to love people I didn't like, and no duty to swallow lies. Like an apple falling from a mountain, I could only be myself. But I didn't fall. The world took me into its hands and consumed what I'd grown into. Society taught me lessons like school teachers who hate kids. School gave me wisdom like churches who just open on Sunday. Houses of worship spoke of morality like architects who only mind their own houses. And so I forgot about the secrets of my own biology. I drank when I shouldn't have. I laughed like an audience who didn't enjoy the joke but paid too much for the ticket. Like a trembling body on the edge, I pronounced answers like questions, refusing all motion, unwilling to trust the strength of the rope society had given. I'd like to now read the most recent poem I've written. It's roughly a 300-page work of continuous verse. Obviously, we will not hear all of that this afternoon, but the work is about a Greek man who never gets tired. So this is hence an epic, but not in the traditional sense of conquest and war. It's really about a man and woman and their philosophical struggle in the arena of existence. And it's called St. John's Dance. It has two epigraphs, one by Yannis Ritsos, a Greek poet, and he says, every single word is an exodus for a meeting, canceled many times. And one other epigraph from Plato, on a planet covered only by water, how do drowning people say help? There once was a man who never tired of anything. Like a leaf on a tree, he stayed green. But when those fall seasons came, he alone didn't change colors. And when winter too graced his doorstep, he neither opened when it knocked, nor did he shut any windows, even when it came in without asking. For this man, whose name was Aimai Kurasmenos, the sea had no shore, only transient coasts, and the land no borders, just short-lived divisions. His life had begun like a ruler praying to be measured. The scales in his time had left the plant without markings, and except for this law, all else seemed perfect. Those who looked closer saw his mind's straightness. Those who really knew him saw something else. He was a yardstick without a yardstick for measures. Yet even the strongest fire must burn with laws of the flames. Even the toughest wind mustn't doubt the direction it's given. Aimai Kurasmenos had this curious trait, and so he never questioned his life's path. When people invited him, he always left the party last. When kindly asked to leave, he was the first not to take offense. Aimai Kurasmenos lived this way not because he liked it, not because people both hated and loved him. He simply couldn't tire of being hated and loved. Still, Aimai Kurasmenos was a man of taste and judgment. Since he never slept for pleasure, he drank only the finest coffee. Since he always had energy, he bought the most precise watches. When he explored a new city, he never walked too much. And when he felt at home, he never walked too little. He visited his mother often, but always took the longest way. When his wife was away, he never managed to miss her. When she was in his presence, he also didn't tire of that. It seemed like Lippi Kurasmenos had found the perfect husband, except for some small details. She could get sapped strolling foreign cities, and when her mother called, she gladly took shortcuts to visit. When her husband was away, she never tired of missing him. When she was there, she felt sure he didn't care. So it was that Lippi Kurasmenos also had taste, and judgment too. Hence, their marriage couldn't last. Aimai Kurasmenos didn't know how to feel about his wife. His joy and sadness were like two people, those on opposite sides of a wall, happy to live on either side. When friends came to comfort him, he prompted them in, much like a cave welcomes echoes. When those same friends rose to leave, he didn't try to delay their departure, so common for a Greek host. In this sense, Aimai Kurasmenos neither had enemies, nor did he have friends. He was the calmest and most violent sea. Violent because he sunk ships, calm because he didn't care who'd sink. Vessels for him were just bodies of water holding a vessel's fate, not the other way around. Pirates and coast guards met the same fate when obliged. They also stayed afloat when the depths said so. Those born to drown trust in the kindness of oceans. Those born to fish can't trust anything else. It would hence be wise to say Aimai Kurasmenos was a fisherman born to drown. He was also a farmer, the one who loved the sun but didn't like the drought. And so it was that on some days he asked questions. Can any microscope find mercy inside a raindrop? To the ant, that bead of water might as well be the sea. Against the dam, it could be the last bead a giant can hold. For Aimai Kurasmenos, such musings were fun and also quite futile, meaning in one word, his curious trait also made him a thinker. He never got tired of asking questions, and which ones? Those he knew no one could answer. Is there a God? On some days there was, on others there wasn't. Is morality absolute? In some cases it is, in others it isn't. Does qualia exist? For humans it did, perhaps. For animals, perhaps it didn't. There was no real way to know. If you forget something, is it still a memory? It depends how long you forget it, forever or just for a time. And though his queries were caterpillars, they never turned into butterflies. Though his answers were parachutes, they had to jump over remote islands. Still, the tireless Greek could be sure of one thing, that one day was always 24 hours, even if he wasn't sure when the day ended or when it began. So, I'd like to finish with this poem, which was from my first chapbook, the first I ever published, and it's called July 4th. Slowly, fires die at Huntington Beach, and everyone leaves the pits. Alone, I walk the bike path near a crowd, talking, laughing, and smoking a joint. I try to feel what they feel, but that makes me think. How does everyone stop thinking? How does everyone simply feel? I see the last fireworks glaze across the sky, and for that moment, looking around, I seem to have the answers. In a flash, the roars subside, and all that remains are scattered applauses which will fade too, and waves that never age. Independence is great, but I've been alone for too long. I casted out those around me and declared myself to be different. Out of pride, I haven't felt how it feels to be helped in a long time. My mind is a Roman candle waiting to be lit. My thoughts are long-distance lovers before the invention of telephones. My anger is a steam locomotive charging through Arizona in July. My temptations are the Wright brothers studying birds in 1899. I feel more invisible than Jupiter's moons in 1609. I'm a portrait painter who finds people's conversations monotonous. I'm a librarian with overdue books. I will end it there. Once more, thank you again, Harry, and everyone at Creative Chaos. It's been a great pleasure hearing you read, Polly, and I wish you all the best. Thank you so much.
Likewise.
David, your poetry it has such great force. The narrative strength and the clarity, its accessibility, the sagaciousness of it. You know, you just have such a deep range and such depth in what you look at it. And it's not only narrative, but it's also lyrical. And I just have a couple of questions to ask you.
Thank you, Harry. I appreciate it. This is, it means a lot coming from you. I appreciate it.
You know, even when your interviews, you know, I've read obviously the interview you did with me and with other poets from California, and you're not only you know, you're also compassionate, and there's a lyricism in your poetry, but the poetry insists itself, and you know, you're really an amazing poet. The force, I don't know where that comes from. Maybe it's just a life force, but you just have such a great mind. But a couple of questions. Number one, when did you write your first poem?
It must have been when I was very young, and it was terrible, Harry. I admit, the first poem I wrote must have been before my teenage years, and I wanted to write a good poem, and I felt like I had written a good poem, but now I know that it was a terrible one. I actually have some pieces that I reread, you know, from those earlier days, and really that was not good. So,
what attracts you to the poetry form?
the lyricism, the ability to say something in a very short time. So that's what I love about it. You know, fiction is kind of a lengthy process, so you spend a great deal of time trying to say what you want to say, but a line of poetry has just such immense power that, you know, I feel like this is the art form for me. This is what I want to do.
My last question, and just a brief answer, if you may. How long have you been living in Italy, and why did you choose to live there?
I've been in Italy for close to 5 years. So I arrived in September 2019, and I actually came here to study. My brother and I, we both came out here at the same time. And I thought, you know, I'm going to go and study in Italy because that's what I wanted to do. And we'll see after I finish what will happen. And I just ended up staying, you know, one thing led to the other. And it's been 5 years since that day. So I couldn't be happier.
Thank you for all your great contribution to poetry, not only your own wonderful poetry, but your care for other poets, you know, especially in California. So thank you. I'm going to make an announcement for next Tuesday's show. But first, I want to thank David and Polly once again. Next Tuesday, we will have a reading from the collected poems of Theodore Redke. The wonderful readers are Corinne Conley, Kay Wiseman, James Cushing, and Celeste Goyer. Please join us. And thank you once again, David Garyan and Polly Geller, for a memorable, inspiring, and uplifting reading. It's really been wonderful.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you so much.